need to when Heather puts them on there of Sunday
Pretty
school.
much the last.
Okay. So, but,
Chapter that you give us.
we are in chapter 40.
Okay, so all right.
Yeah, so, I mean, it's a story we've probably all heard before, but, last week, we talked about Joseph. Joseph was in prison. Joseph again gained favor. Pharaoh got mad at his butler, which is really the cupbearer, and we talked about last week that the cupbearer, his job was a very profound, important job because he was there to protect Pharaoh from any poison. He tested the drink. It was really a high-risk job because if anybody that was under him decided they wanted to poison Pharaoh, they would wait a couple of minutes because that cupbearer would be the one that would taste the drink, and I think he would taste the food. And if there was poison in it, it would get him first, and they knew something was up. Well, we don't know what they did to make Pharaoh so mad, but the cupbearer and the butler, or the baker, both got thrown in prison. Joseph was in a position in the prison that he took care of the prisoners. He was over the prison. Basically, I said last week, I'm calling him the warden. The warden worried for nothing in the prison because he had Joseph there. Joseph kind of fell into the same thing. And what I want you to keep in mind on this is he was right where God wanted him. Now, that sounds kind of extremely harsh because he was right where God wanted him when he was a slave. He was right where God wants him now that he's in prison. And later on in the next chapter that we get into next week, he's, again, right where God wants him. It's all in God's plan. It's all in God's plan what's going on. But also, I want to read this because I forgot to read it last week. But in Psalms 105, because I never knew this was here, okay? But Psalms 105, verse 16, when you read the story of Joseph and everything that he went through, it sounded like everything was so good that maybe nothing bad happened because God was that good that he was taking care of him. As a slave, I think sometimes that we get the impression he was a slave, but it didn't seem all that bad because he had such favor with Potiphar that there was probably no beatings, there was nothing bad. And now he's in prison. You don't read anything bad that happened to him other than he was falsely accused. Potiphar had him thrown in the prison. You don't read anything, but it's kind of interesting that in 105, it gives you a little bit of what he went through. And it said, moreover, he called for a famine upon the land. He brake the whole staff of bread. And then 17 says, and he sent a man before them, even Joseph, who was sold for a servant, whose feet they hurt with feathers. He was laid in iron, until the time that his word came. The word of the Lord tried him. And the king sent, and then we get into this part next week, the king sent and loosed him, even the ruler of the people, and let him go free. He made him lord of his house and ruler of all his substance, to bind his princes at his pleasure, and teach his senators wisdom. So, sometimes you may not read it that way, but sometimes as you can read it, you're like, well, it didn't sound like prison was that bad for him. You know, now he went to a prison where the people who made the king mad went. And I think it was a little bit nicer than a normal prison that just anybody got sent to.
Kind of like our minimum.
Right. Might have been more like a house, like what Paul went through. When Paul was never really in prison, but he did go to prison. But a lot of times he was in a house, and guards watched over that house. He couldn't leave, couldn't do any of that. But still, it was prison. Joseph wasn't free, but sometimes as you read this, you don't see all that, but that gives you a little glimpse into, he was beat, he was hurt in the beginning. I think as time went on, he was treated better. But going into prison, he was treated roughly, and I think as sold into slavery, he was treated roughly, because I think it scared Joseph. I don't care how much confidence you have in God, and how much you love God, and how much you know God's going to take care of you. when bad things happen to you, you freak out a little bit and you step into your own, and then you realize, well, wait a minute, God is in control. God has got this. I need to quit worrying. So I think Joseph would be like any of us if you were sold into slavery. You know what I mean? Or you were thrown into prison. You would freak out a little bit. You would get scared a little bit. And in prison, they're gonna make you understand that. I don't think Joseph bowed up or tried to escape, but I think they had to say, hey, we want you to know in prison, I'm in charge, not you. And they were rough on him, and they locked him up. So I just wanted to share that with you. So he's in there, and he's taking care of the butler, and he's taking care of the baker. And he's attending to their needs. Well, one morning he wakes up and he comes in and he sees that their countenance, that they were sad, had a scared look on their face, maybe had a confused look on their face. And he said, hey guys, what's up? And they said, we both have had dreams. So I'm assuming they talked to each other. They probably shared their dreams and said, we've had these dreams that just, we don't understand them. And Egypt was real big on having people interpret dreams. It was real big on this. And he says, does not God is the interpreter of dreams. Let me know tell me what your dreams are. And that's what we're going to pick up today. So if you've got your Bible, go to chapter 9, it's in 49 through 13. I can't talk this morning.
What?
9 through 13, verses 9 through 13 of chapter 40.
Genesis or?
No,
Genesis
Genesis 49,
40.
Verse 9 through 13. The chapter we're in, I said it wrong. I said chapter.
Genesis 40,
Yeah.
verse 9.
Okay.
Through 13. Sorry if I confused you back there, Miss Brenda.
You confused everybody.
I did.
You're talking too fast.
Yeah.
Am I talking too fast?
I thought it was Matthew. But
Yeah, well, David, that's just you. You can't see it anyway. You just
My
listen.
daughter's from Buford, she talks too fast, and I tell her, Julie, you're southern, slow down, right, slow down.
Yes, ma'am. So 9 through 13 says this. And the chief butler told his, no, I'm just kidding. And the chief butler, is that too slow?
have you got a stick you can do it like this time? Because it's
I got one of the truck.
I was only kidding there, Miss Brenda. And it says this, and the chief butler told his dream to Joseph and said to him, in my dream, behold, a vine was before me. And in the vine were 3 branches. And it was though it budded, and his blossoms shot forth, and the clusters thereof brought forth ripe grapes. And Pharaoh's cup was in my hand, and I took the grapes and pressed them in the Pharaoh's cup. And I gave the cup into Pharaoh's hand. And Joseph said unto him, this is the interpretation of it. The 3 branches are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thine head and restore thee into thy place. And thou shalt deliver Pharaoh's cup into his hand after the former manner when thou wast his butler. So we see here the butler, the cupbearer, shares his dream. And he tells him, he says, hey, here was my dream. Now, to me, it's amazing because if someone come up and shared that dream with me, I get it once he told me, but if I read that first part, I'm like, dude, you eat too late at night. That's all I'm going to tell you. But he shares his dream with him. And Joseph's like, hey, look, be of good cheer. There's some good news in this. Because you got to think, here's this cupbearer. He's in prison. He doesn't know what he's done wrong. He does not know what he's done wrong to be put in prison other than he angered Pharaoh. And he's sitting there thinking, I'm lucky to be alive right now. I am lucky to be alive because usually you would think of kings back in that day, off with his head. Take his head off. He has angered me. I mean, Joseph's the same way. He's lucky to be alive because Potiphar's wife pretty much lied and said, hey, he tried to have sex with me when it was her trying to have sex with him. And this cupbearer is like, and now I've had this dream, it's bothered me. And Joseph says, well, share this dream with me. And then Joseph says, hey, look, be of good cheer. Look, let me tell you something. There's some good news in this dream. there's some good news in this interpretation that God has shown me to tell you. Let me tell you what it is. He said in 3 days, you're going to be set free. In 3 days, you're going to be released from this prison, and you're going to be returned back to what you were doing. Now, once Joseph said that, that dream makes sense. You know what I'm saying? And I'm take it back to the first time you ever read it. You'd be like, okay, grapes, bush. Okay, I get it. He was cupbearers. But he's saying you're going to be reinstated in the job that you were. You're not demoted. You're not this. You're not that. Be of good cheer. You're going to be restored. And I'm sure that this was an encouragement to the butler. But I'm also sure that those 3 days was the longest 3 days that he ever had to wait. You know? Because it was like with me on Tuesday when they said, hey, they're going to come in and you're going to do this CT heart thing, whatever they called it. It was forever. And then after that, it felt like it was forever before I got released from prison, the hospital. Because, you know, I mean, I wasn't impatient, but it just seemed like it was a very, very, very long day. Because you're ready to go. Yeah, you know, they're saying, hey, you're okay, you're ready to go. All right, can I run out of here? You know. So Joseph shares this good news with him, and it's good news. But then Joseph says this, and basically point 5, I know Miss Brenda keeps up with notes. Point 5 is, he's telling him, hey, remember me. And verse 14 and 15 is this. It says this, but think on me when it shall be well with thee, and show kindness, I pray thee, unto me, and make mention of me unto Pharaoh, and bring me out of this house. He says, hey, look, when you're released and you're to Pharaoh, remember me. Don't forget about me. Tell Pharaoh all the good things that I've done to you and how I've taken care of you, and let him know what I've told you. Let him know that I've taken care of you, that I watched over you, that everything went well. You didn't hurt for a meal. You wasn't lost and didn't know where to go. I calmed your fears. I took care of you. That I'm a really good guy. Let Pharaoh know, and maybe Pharaoh will show mercy on me and release me. Wiersbe said that there was 2 times in Joseph's life where you see unbelief in him. And Wiersbe, and I can see it, Wiersbe said this is one of them. That instead of trusting God, because I'm going to share something with that in a minute, he said, hey, tell Pharaoh all the good things. He took it into his own to say, hey, make sure Pharaoh remembers me. And then he says this in verse 15. For indeed I was stolen away out of the land of the Hebrews. He didn't even throw his brothers under the bus. He didn't go into big whiny details and said, my brothers beat me and threw me in a pit and then sold me as a slave. He just says, I was stolen out of the land of the Hebrews. And here also have done nothing that should put me into the dungeon. And so as he's sharing with the butler, with the cupbearer, he's saying, hey, realize I've done nothing wrong. I did nothing wrong to be stolen out of the land that I grew up in, out of the land that God had given my family. I've done nothing wrong. And then I've been thrown in this prison and I didn't even do anything wrong. I took a stand and I stood for what was right and I walked with God and I didn't give in to what would have been so easily for any other man to give in to. I didn't give in. And I've been falsely accused and thrown in this dungeon. So he's saying, please remember me. So as he tells them that he might set him free, this was Joseph's hope of freedom. Joseph was working toward and trying to get his freedom, but it was not God's plan. It was not God's plan. We will see when we get into 41 that the butler will remember Joseph when the Pharaoh has a dream. But it's 2 years later. And he'll say, I remember a man who told me, who interpreted a dream that I had, that me and the baker had. But it'll be 2 years from now before the butler remembers him. But I'm sure during this time, The butler's going, yeah, I'll remember you, no problem. Hey, no problem. It doesn't say it, but I'm just kind of not adding to, okay? So don't take that. But I'm just thinking what any other normal conversation would go, yeah, I'll remember you. Yeah, hey, no problem, man. I will remember you. Now, get it, at the same time, it doesn't say this in here, and so I may be wrong, but I look at two interpretations of this, and I'll share them both at the thing. But keep in mind, the butler was an Egyptian. Joseph was a Hebrew. And if you remember going through how most people thought of the Hebrews anyway, or the Jews. So we see that. Well, then all of a sudden we see this. We see the baker's dream is shared. To me, it's kind of like the baker went, hey, man, the butler had a good dream. I don't have a good dream. So look at 16 through 19. Anybody got any questions so far or any comments?
What was the butler?
The butler, he was a cupbearer.
Okay, but you said it was a Jew or?
The butler was Egyptian. As far as I can tell, the butler was Egyptian because he was part of Pharaoh. He was high up in Pharaoh's thing. He was Egyptian.
Okay.
I mean, he was an Egyptian, and most of their slaves, you know, was probably Hebrew and whoever they had conquered, which Joseph was sold into. 16 through 19 says this. And when the chief baker saw that the interpretation was good, he said unto Joseph, I also was in my dream, and behold, I had 3 white baskets on my head. And in the uppermost basket there was of all manner of baked meats for Pharaoh. And the birds did eat them out of the basket upon my head. And Joseph answered and said, This is the interpretation thereof. The 3 baskets are 3 days. Yet within 3 days shall Pharaoh lift up thy head from off of thee, and shall hang thee on a tree. And the birds shall eat thy flesh from off of thee. So we see here the baker's dream. The baker saw the butler's dream was a good one, so he shared his dream, expecting the same results. Would we not be the same way? He was like, hey, I want to know my dream. I want to know my dream. I kind of think he was like Joe Pesci in Lethal Weapon 3. Hey, if you remember that. Heather won't get that, but I know y'all two will, and maybe Miss Brenda back there. But he was like, hey, here's my dream. And he didn't hesitate to share it. Now to me, if you compare them two dreams, the butler's dream or the cupbearer's dream sound pretty good. His went to Pharaoh's. Could you tell a difference in the baker's dream? The birds ate it. There wasn't nothing given to Pharaoh. And now I wouldn't have called it if I was sharing the dream either. But I kind of wonder, like again, it does not say what he did wrong, but I wonder if the baker was stealing food from Pharaoh. And that's why he got thrown in prison. And because the cupbearer and them were maybe so close in their job positions, he didn't know which one was it and threw both of them in. I don't know. I don't know what he did, and
Possibility.
because the birds have swooped in to steal Pharaoh's food as it's on top of his head. But he said, Joseph, I don't think it was be of good cheer, hey, happy, but he said, hey, look, this is what's going to happen. In 3 days, Pharaoh's going to take off your head. Back in those days when they hanged, the Egyptians didn't hang. They would chop off your head and then hang your body. And that's what it meant the birds would eat of your flesh. He was hanged out in there, but they didn't have gallows where they hang them like we're used to, rope around the neck. His head would be taken off, and then he was hung out there. It was kind of cool learning that little bit of history. Wearsby kind of shared it, and then I saw it in a couple other ones because the way I would have read it, if I didn't have a commentary, I would have just thought the other way. But he was kind of put out basically on a stake or whatever out there, a headless body out there. And I think if it's like anything else, it was a warning to others, don't do what he did. You know, and that's just me using Ryan knowledge, so.
Or back then.
Yeah. Joseph shares the bad news, and so here we are. I imagine for him, it was probably the shortest 3 days of his entire life. if he believed what Joseph said, and it never said that he doubted it. So there was excitement in the prison, and there was sadness in the prison. You got what I'm saying? So we get to verse 20, and God's interpretation of their dreams is correct. And it came to pass the third day, which was Pharaoh's birthday, that he made a feast unto all his servants. I thought that was kind of weird. It's his birthday and he makes a feast to all his servants.
He's
But-
got everything in the world, what are they gonna give him?
I know. It's just, I'm thinking birthdays, you know. Nothing's wrong with it. It just sounds weird. You got what I'm saying? And he made a feast unto all his servants, and he lifted up the head of the chief butler and of the chief baker among his servants. So he's bringing them out. And he restored the chief butler unto his butlership again. And I can imagine that excitement if the butler doubted Joseph, and this came about, and they're brought before him, and he says, "Hey, you're restored to my job." Just the excitement that he had. He was overwhelmed that he's restored back. Because that was a moment right there. I mean, that was a thank you moment. But he hanged the chief baker as Joseph had interpreted them. And I'm thinking as they're both brought into to the Pharaoh, and this is me just seeing it, they're both one's hoping he's right and one's hoping he's wrong. And he sees, and then I know immediately if I was the baker, I'd be getting a little worried. Now the baker, I'm assuming the baker knows whatever he did wrong was wrong. We're just never shared in the story. But when he sees that the cupbearer, the butler is free and he's not, but here it is, and yet did not the chief butler remember Joseph, but forgot him. So we get to that point, and here's where my two theories, and I'm going with the second one, but here's the two theories. I believe the first one that I look at, that why did he forget Joseph, is again, he was Egyptian. He thought he was better than everybody else. Yes, Joseph interpreted it, but maybe in his mind he thought he got lucky, okay? And he just forgot. But here's what I think happened. In the excitement of knowing you're free, you're not going to get killed, you've just heard that the baker's going to lose his head. He had heard that because I think both of them sat beside him. And when the baker heard his good news, he sat there to hear maybe the good news. When the baker heard the butler's good news, the butler stayed to hear the baker's good news when he said, "Hey, I've had a dream also. Here's my dream." I don't think he got up and went back to wherever he was at. You got what I'm saying? And so he's excited that, hey, I'm free, I'm restored, I'm back to where I'm supposed to be. But then also, he's just seen the baker get killed. And in all that excitement, are you going to make Pharaoh, are you going to rub Pharaoh the wrong way and say, "Hey, there's this Jew in here there's this Hebrew in here that interpreted my dream, and he's done nothing wrong and he wants to get free." Because in essence, you're telling the Pharaoh that guy was put in prison for being wrong, and his head executioner, his head guy over the army, Potiphar, was wrong by putting him in there. I think it's in the excitement and in the fear of rationalizing that in your head.
Did I read or did I misinterpret back in 39 or 40 that Joseph was like over the household of the Pharaoh and everything was running great?
Or of the next chapter?
Now, the
Previous chapter.
The
Yes.
previous chapter.
Yes. 39, which verse was that? Oh yeah, it says Potiphar had nothing to worry about. He didn't worry about anything. The only thing he worried about was what was set before him to eat.
You would think in 2 years or more time that Joseph was in prison, things wouldn't be moving as smoothly as they have been, and he would have noticed that. But
Yeah, but it's
maybe
never
I
said. Yeah.
just
And then my thing is and like I said, I try not to jump too far ahead.
Right.
So, but I never hear any more mention of Potiphar. Maybe Potiphar's not there anymore.
Right.
Maybe God chose not to have him share whatever the rest of that story is. You know, because the theory and all the commentaries I read and how I seen it, I think Potiphar knew how his wife was.
Mm-hmm.
He had a trophy wife though.
Right.
I mean, he had a trophy wife. I'm under the understanding, and this is what I believe, it's not in the Bible, it's just my thinking, that if she was that way toward Joseph, there was a lot of other servants that didn't say no when she wanted her wicked, wily ways.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah, when she wanted what she wanted, they had no problem saying no to this hot mama coming up to him saying, I mean, you got what I'm saying?
Yeah.
I kind of think Potiphar knew what was going on. That's why Joseph was not. Now, this is all God's plan. This is all God's story. Now, get that.
Right.
But I think at the same time, Potiphar wasn't allowed to kill him or whatever, but most people would have lost their life for that. Because Potiphar would have been in a rage, knowing here's someone that was going to hurt my wife, was wanting to rape my wife. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
But yet he was thrown, and I don't know if it was a nice prison, more like a house prison than like the dungeon. But the way it reads, he was almost thrown into something that was a lot nicer than what most people went through.
It just blows my mind that the Pharaoh's household continued to run smoothly as it had under Joseph.
Right. And it wasn't Pharaoh's, it was Potiphar's.
Right.
So, yeah.
Sorry.
No, that's okay. I get them mixed up too because they both start with a P.
It's like, wait, it's that one.
Yeah. It was like the butler and the baker.
Right.
That's why I kept trying to say cupbearer and then I'd say butler. But here's what I want you to get out of this whole story. Joseph spends 2 more years in this prison. We'll see that next week. So if you guys read 41, and then I'm going to have something I'm going to tell you as soon as we get done. Sometimes we will not understand, and I think this is Joseph too, sometimes we will not understand why God has us where he has us, or what we are going through. I'm beyond a shadow of doubt, Joseph is as human as we are. Joseph was probably maybe a little more faithful than most of us in the room, maybe not. But I'm sure he had those times of, why am I here? Why am I here? Why am I going through this? Yes, not that bad for me, but yet it's still prison. Keep that in your mind. He wasn't living in the lap of luxury in prison. He lived in the same kind of squalor that everybody else lived in that prison. But it is God's plan, so trust his plan. He knows best. And I think Joseph sees that. As Joseph is forgotten and he spends 2 more years in there, he sees that it's God's plan. Is he seeing what God is getting him to the point to when there is a famine in the land and his brothers come begging for food. He will recognize them. They won't really recognize him. He will take them and he will bring them in. And you see ultimate forgiveness of brothers that you could just snap your fingers and off with their heads. And he showed. To me, everything we've read, Joseph's there. Joseph is faithful. He trusts God. He listens to God. He obeys God. I mean, he could have said yes, and he said no. I won't do this to Potiphar, who has taken care of me, and he wants for nothing. He trusts me with everything. And marriage is sacred, but I'm not going to do it to my God either. And I think he realizes that, hey, he's in God's plan. Sometimes we don't like God's plan. Sometimes we don't like where God is putting us, where God has us going, what God's got us in. Maybe life isn't great. You wouldn't expect another surgery, but maybe this is God's plan for you to see something or share Christ with somebody. There's things that go on in our life. David and you have shared, as y'all shared what God did as David went through his stuff. It's all in God's plan, even when it's not looking good in what we think our plans should be or what we think God's plans are for us. And our biggest thing is to trust Him. And that's a hard thing to do.
It would be nice if you would push for once in a while,
Oh yeah,
just a short sentence.
send a note.
Yeah,
Send me a text.
just a word, just a sentence.
Send me a text. So here's what I wanted to tell you guys.